The tablet in my hospital bag was showing words Caleb had never sent me. Grandpa asleep. The cardiac monitor beside my bed kept answering with the same bright beep. My fingers felt thick and useless against the cold glass, and every time I lifted my right hand, the incision under my breastbone pulled like a wire being tightened. The room smelled of antiseptic and warmed plastic. A bitter metal taste clung to the back of my tongue. I blinked until the letters stopped doubling. Blue door locked. Mom's friends upstairs. No therapy today. 4 phrases. 4 different timestamps. At 63, after more than 30 years working with children who used communication devices, I knew the difference between random button pressing and a pattern worth preserving. Before retirement, I had been the principal of a special education school outside Seattle. I had watched teachers dismiss a child's repeated words as noise, only to discover later that the child had been trying to tell us exactly what happened. Caleb was my grandson, and those words had arrived while I was lying open on an operating table. The screen dimmed. I tapped it with my thumb, missed, and hit the edge of the case instead. Pain ran under my ribs. I stopped breathing for a second. "Mr. Mercer?" the nurse said from the doorway. Her shoes squeaked once against the floor. She came over, checked the monitor, then looked at the tablet balanced against my blanket. "You need to rest," she said. "That means no work." "It isn't work. That's what every man with a screen says." Her voice was dry, not unkind. She reached toward the tablet. "Please leave it," I said. The effort made my throat scrape. She paused. "My grandson uses it to communicate." The nurse lowered her hand. 5 minutes. "Thank you." She adjusted the oxygen line beneath my nose. The tubing rubbed a sore place behind my ear, and the monitor returned to its steady beep. When she stepped away, I opened the Clear Voice Link summary again. The 4 phrases remained. Grandpa asleep. Blue door locked. Mom's friends upstairs. No therapy today. Calling Ryan would have been easy. 1 tap, 1 demand, and I could have made him explain why Caleb's device was feeding me sentences from a house I hadn't entered in weeks. But explanations given under warning have a way of arriving polished. I had spent too many years watching adults clean up their stories before a child could finish telling his. So I did what I used to ask my staff to do. Preserve first. Interpret later. The export wheel kept turning while the monitor counted my pulse aloud. I held the tablet flat against the blanket and waited for the file to finish without touching anything else. The companion tablet had been tucked inside my overnight bag because Ryan had insisted I bring only what I needed. Years earlier, both Ryan and Vanessa had signed the narrow authorization that let me receive Caleb's weekly activity export. They had called it a backup. I had called it common sense. Now the latest export had synchronized on the afternoon of my surgery. I pressed the export icon and waited. A small wheel turned. The device hummed faintly against my palm. My phone buzzed inside the plastic hospital tray. The family group thread was called Dad Recovery. Ryan had posted a photograph of me from less than an hour earlier. My skin looked waxy under the recovery room lights. Tape crossed my chest. My mouth hung slightly open. Below the photo, Vanessa had written, "From now on, we don't have a problem anymore." Ryan answered with a laughing emoji. For several seconds, I watched the tiny yellow face shake with silent laughter. Then a typing bubble appeared beneath Ryan's name. It stayed there, vanished, returned, and vanished again. My thumb rested over the keyboard. There were a dozen things a father could write to his son after seeing that. Most of them would have felt good for less than a minute. I typed 1 word. Understood. The message showed, delivered. Ryan did not reply. A moment later, the phone at the nurse's station rang outside my room. Footsteps approached, quick and soft. The same nurse leaned through the doorway. "Your son called the desk. He says you may be confused from the medication." I read a message. "I told him you were awake and oriented." "Did he ask to speak to me?" She held my gaze for half a second too long. "No." That answer weighed more than the tablet. The nurse checked my blood pressure, then pointed at both devices. 2 more minutes. After that, they go in the drawer. I nodded. The export finished. I left the file in the read-only folder where the system had placed it, with the timestamp and device number untouched. Then I switched the tablet to airplane mode. By evening, the anesthesia fog had thinned enough for the ceiling tiles to hold still. Pain medicine softened the edges of the room without taking the pressure from my chest. Every breath reminded me someone had opened my body that morning and wired me back together. Ryan finally called. "Dad," he said, too loudly. "You shouldn't be on your phone. I'm not driving." "That isn't funny." I wasn't joking. A silence followed. In the background, I heard cabinet doors closing and the high clink of glass against glass. Ryan lowered his voice. "Vanessa said you saw the group message. She wrote it where I could read it. She thought you were asleep." That part was clear. Another voice moved behind him. Vanessa said something I couldn't make out. Ryan exhaled near the microphone. "She meant we don't have to worry about you overdoing things anymore. That's all. Of course. You've just had major surgery. Maybe don't turn every sentence into an investigation." That word caught my attention. Investigation. I shifted against the pillow. The incision tugged, and my hand closed around the folded blanket. "How is Caleb?" I asked. Ryan's answer came too fast. "Fine. Everything's normal." Vanessa spoke louder this time. "He needed a mental health day." Ryan stopped breathing into the phone. I looked at the tablet drawer. "A day away from what?" I asked. "Therapy," Vanessa said. Her voice had changed into the soft, measured tone she used in videos about patience and sacrifice. "He was overwhelmed, Stephen. Good mothers notice those things." "And good fathers?" Ryan cut in. "Dad, this is exactly what I mean. You need sleep." I asked whether Caleb went to therapy this week. "He's fine," Ryan said. Vanessa added. "We handled it." Two answers. Neither matched the other. The monitor beside me sped up by 3 beeps. Ryan heard it. "See? This isn't good for you." "No," I said. "It isn't." I ended the call before either of them could decide what I meant. The nurse returned and slipped my phone into the drawer. Done for tonight. I waited until her steps faded. Then I opened the drawer again. Only a few inches. Enough. The tablet's screen cast a pale strip across the blanket. I lowered the brightness and opened the weekly care summary that had arrived before surgery. Thursday afternoon showed a scheduled therapy session. The phrase "no therapy today" carried a Thursday timestamp. That alone proved nothing. Schedules changed. Children got sick. Therapists canceled. So I checked the other timestamps. Blue Door Locked had appeared on Thursday too, 20 minutes before the canceled session. Mom's friends upstairs followed 11 minutes later. My hand began to tremble. I rested it on the mattress until it stopped. During my years as a principal, I had trained younger teachers to separate what they knew from what they feared. A phrase was not proof. A timestamp was not motive. A pattern had to survive contact with an outside fact. I opened Vanessa's public profile. Her latest story had already expired from the main feed, but the tagged vendor repost remained. A table covered in white linen stood beneath hanging lights. Glasses, flower arrangements, trays of food. Vanessa smiled beside 6 women near the upstairs landing of Ryan's house. The post carried the same Thursday date. I zoomed in, slowly, because my hand would not hold steady. Behind Vanessa's shoulder was the narrow interior door Ryan had painted blue when the house was renovated for Caleb. A digital lock glowed above the handle. The story timestamp matched the minute Caleb had selected Mom's friends upstairs, and the blue door behind her was closed. By morning, the blue door had become the only thing in the room I could see clearly. Not the ceiling tiles, not the gray light leaking around the blinds, not even the paper cup of broth cooling beside my bed. Just that narrow door behind Vanessa's shoulder, closed while Caleb's device said it had been locked. The oxygen line hissed under my nose. Every breath pressed against the wired ache beneath my sternum, and the smell of eggs from a breakfast tray in the hallway turned my stomach before the cart even reached my room. I opened the trust payment portal on my tablet. The authorization Ryan and Vanessa had signed years earlier did not let me read Caleb's therapy notes, diagnosis, or anything said during a session. It did allow me to verify whether a service billed to the trust had been completed, canceled, or refused, and who had made that decision. That was enough. I entered Thursday's date and requested only 3 fields: scheduled service, status, and cancellation source. The portal chimed. Cancelled by caregiver. No mention of illness. No provider cancellation. No note saying Caleb had been unable to attend. My thumb hovered above the screen while the monitor clicked through my pulse. Vanessa had called it a mental health day. Ryan had said everything was normal. The record used neither phrase. A video call came through before I could close the page. Vanessa's face filled the screen. Her hair was pinned back, and the pale sweater she wore matched the careful softness in her voice. "Good morning, Stephen," she said. "Ryan told me you were up half the night." Ryan wasn't here. He spoke with the nurses. Apparently he prefers them. Her smile stayed in place, but one corner stopped moving. "You've been through a lot. Nobody expects you to make sense of every message right now." Behind her, a man laughed. Glass touched glass, followed by the scrape of a chair. "Is Caleb with you?" I asked. "He's resting." "Who canceled his therapy Thursday?" Vanessa glanced to her right. Ryan was close enough to hear, though he remained outside the frame. "I did," she said. "He needed family time." "What did that look like?" Her brow creased. What did what look like? Family time. Another burst of conversation rolled through the room behind her. Someone called Vanessa's name. She muted the microphone, turned away, and spoke to whoever was there. When the sound returned, her voice had dropped lower. "We sat together," Vanessa said. "We kept things quiet. You know Caleb doesn't do well when he's overstimulated." A bottle opened somewhere near the phone. "Sounds peaceful," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You're listening for the wrong things. Then tell me the right thing. Your job is to recover. My job ended when I retired. You know what I mean." "I do." The answer made her blink. Ryan moved into view at last. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, and his jaw kept shifting as if he were chewing something. "Dad," he said, "you need to stop interrogating Vanessa." I asked who canceled a service paid through Caleb's trust. "That's our family business. The trust is Caleb's business." Ryan looked past the camera. Vanessa said something too low for me to catch. My son leaned closer. "You're not in a condition to do this." "Do what?" "Dig around." The monitor beside me quickened. I pulled the folded pillow tighter against my chest until the incision stopped tugging. "Was Thursday the only session she canceled?" I asked. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa answered for him. "I'm ending this call." The screen went dark. For a few seconds, the hiss of oxygen and the distant rattle of breakfast carts were the only sounds left. Then a text from Ryan appeared. "You need to focus on surviving." I read it twice. Below that, another message arrived. "Stop giving strangers a window into our family." The word strangers sat there like a thumb pressed against a bruise. The providers he meant had been working with Caleb for years. The trust had paid them because Ryan had approved the payments. Now that their records did not match his story, they had become outsiders. I opened the trust director portal. The formal request box waited at the bottom of the page. My account still had access to the core ledger and audit trail, though several attachments from household vendors had already been marked unavailable. That had not been the case the night before. I typed one narrow request, accounting for the previous 3 months, limited to service verification, supplemental caregiver reimbursement, and documented property use. The portal asked for a reason: potential mismatch between billed services and provider status. My finger rested over the submit button. Once I sent it, Ryan would know the conversation had changed. A private question could still be dismissed as a father overstepping. A formal demand became a record. I pressed submit. The receipt appeared with a timestamp. 10 minutes later, Ryan texted again. "I'll have someone prepare it when Dad is medically competent." He had written my name as if he were speaking about me to somebody else. I took a screenshot of the message, then stopped. A screenshot was useful for memory, not proof. The native thread export would matter more later. The nurse entered with medication and caught me leaning over the tablet. "That's enough," she said. "I'm almost finished." "You said that yesterday." She placed the pills in my palm and waited until I swallowed. The water tasted faintly of plastic. When I tried to sit straighter, pressure spread under my ribs and up toward my neck. The nurse saw my face and lowered the head of the bed. "You are not running a school from here," she said. "I haven't run one in 6 years. Your chest doesn't care." She took the tablet and set it on the tray beyond my reach. For the next 20 minutes, I listened to the air vent hum and counted my breaths the way the respiratory therapist had shown me. In through the nose, hold, out slowly. By the time the tablet came back, my hands were steadier. I did not open every post Vanessa had ever made. That would have been anger dressed as research. Instead, I checked only the dates of the 3 most recent therapy sessions and saved public material with visible timestamps or vendor tags. The first Thursday showed the white table, the glasses, and the blue door. 2 weeks earlier, a florist had tagged Vanessa in photographs from what she called a caregiver support circle. Caleb's session that evening had also been canceled by caregiver. A catering company had posted from the same upstairs landing. Not one event proved why therapy had been canceled. Together, they ended the idea that Thursday had been an isolated choice. A small bell sounded from the trust portal. Ryan had responded. The accounting request had not been denied. Instead, several household attachments were now restricted, including smart home activity and vendor invoices. The core audit log remained visible because Ryan could not remove my Trust Director account without following the instrument. I downloaded the access history for my own account before anything else changed. Near the bottom sat a document title I had never seen. Continuity of Trust. Oversight. During medical incapacity, the file itself was restricted. The audit history was not. Created 3 days before surgery. Opened by Ryan Mercer. Opened again by Ryan Mercer. Opened a 3rd time late the night before I entered the hospital. My chest tightened, this time before I moved. I set the tablet down and waited until the pressure eased. The phrase Vanessa had used in the group thread returned to me. "We don't have a problem anymore." I had assumed the problem was me asking questions. The audit trail suggested something colder. They had prepared for the moment when I could no longer ask them at all. I reopened the formal demand and added a preservation notice covering the core ledger, service verification, caregiver reimbursement, property use records, and all audit metadata tied to the incapacity document. The portal required one final confirmation. Submitting this notice will alert the acting trustee. My son's name sat beneath the warning. For 63 years, I had believed there were doors a father should leave unlocked for his child. Chances to explain, chances to come back, chances to say he had been weak, not cruel. Ryan had spent the night before my surgery opening a document designed to remove me. I pressed confirm. The receipt appeared at the top of the screen. Then the audit history refreshed. Creation date, 3 days before surgery. The creation date stayed on the screen until the nurse came back and took the tablet from my hands. 3 days before surgery. Ryan had opened the incapacity file before anyone cut into my chest, before the breathing tube, before the photograph Vanessa had used as proof that I was no longer a problem. The monitor beside me kept ticking through my pulse while the nurse slid the tablet onto the tray. "No more," she said. "I need 10 minutes. You needed 10 minutes an hour ago." Her fingers tightened around the rail of my bed. The vinyl glove squeaked against the metal. "Mr. Mercer, your chest was opened yesterday. Whatever is on that screen will still be there after you sleep." That was exactly what I no longer believed. Still, I nodded. The nurse dimmed the lights, and the room settled into the low mechanical hum of the air system. Somewhere beyond the door, a cart rattled over a seam in the floor. I slept in pieces. By late morning, I was awake enough to read without the words sliding across the page. The trust summary came first. Ryan had always talked about the house as if he and Vanessa had bought it after years of sacrifice. He called the accessible ramp his project. Vanessa called the downstairs suite the life they had built for Caleb. The deed summary told a different story. Ryan Mercer, as trustee of the Caleb Mercer Supplemental Needs Trust. Not Ryan Mercer, owner. Not Ryan and Vanessa Mercer, husband and wife. Ryan's name appeared only because he held the trustee title. The trust had purchased the property with Caleb's settlement funds, then paid for the wider doors, the lowered counters, the roll-in shower, and the interior quiet room behind the blue door. The occupancy agreement was even plainer. Ryan and Vanessa could live there while providing care for Caleb. They could not borrow against the house. They could not rent any part of it. They held no personal equity. If the property stopped serving Caleb's needs, the successor trustee could begin termination procedures after notice and a transition plan. I read that paragraph twice. The house did not belong to me. It did not belong to Ryan. It was being held for Caleb. My phone rang before I could open the smart home section. Ryan's name filled the screen. "Dad," he said when I answered, "you filed a preservation notice. You received it." That isn't an answer. It is, if the question was whether you received it. His breath came hard through the speaker. A door closed on his end, followed by the short electronic chirp of a keypad lock. "You're treating our home like a crime scene," Ryan said. "Why do you call it your home?" "Because we live here." That wasn't my question. Another pause. Then Ryan's voice softened in the way it used to, when he wanted money without asking for it directly. "Caleb lives here too." Every room was built around him. Vanessa gave up years of her life making this place work. The deed names you as trustee. I know what the deed says. Then you know you don't own it personally. Ryan laughed once, without humor. "Is that what this is? You're going to throw your grandson out of his own house because your feelings got hurt? The occupancy agreement says the house must serve Caleb." "It does." "Then send me the smart lock activity for the interior blue door." The line went quiet enough for me to hear the vent, above my bed. Ryan lowered his voice. "That system is security. It has nothing to do with the trust. The trust owns the property. You're twisting paper into a weapon. I'm asking for a log, and I'm telling you to recover." He ended the call. A few minutes later, the household attachments in the portal remained blocked, but the core property account showed a summary view because the lock system had been purchased through the trust. It did not show video. It did not show who stood on either side of the door. Only time, credential, lock status, and active guest codes. I searched Thursday. The blue door had been locked from the caregiver administrator account at 4:20 in the afternoon. Caleb's therapy had been scheduled for 4:30. At 4:40, 6 temporary guest codes became active. The blue door remained locked for 4 hours and 12 minutes. I set the tablet down and pressed the small pillow against my chest. The fabric smelled faintly of laundry starch. Breathing too deeply pulled at the incision, so I waited until the pressure eased. A lock log could prove only that a lock had been used. It could not prove Caleb had been trapped behind it. I wrote that sentence at the top of my notes. Then I kept reading. The first guest code opened the front door at 4:43. The second at 4:47. 4 more followed within 20 minutes. Near 8:30, a vendor cleanup code opened the back entrance. The blue door unlocked 7 minutes later. 1 closed door, 6 guests, 1 canceled therapy session. Still not enough. Vanessa's original story had disappeared. Her profile now showed a photograph of a mug beside a devotional book, with a caption about protecting peace when others bring chaos into your home. The florist's repost was still public. So was the catering company's tag. I saved the original links and the visible timestamps. No cropped screenshots, no captions copied into my own words. The florist had called the gathering an intimate caregiver circle. The caterer had thanked Vanessa for hosting another private evening and tagged the same address area. Another. The word sat there beneath the photograph. Not one quiet family night, not an isolated support meeting. Another private evening. My phone buzzed with a video request from Vanessa. When I answered, Caleb sat at the kitchen table. The blue door was visible behind him, open now. Vanessa stood close enough that her hand rested on the back of his chair. "Look who wanted to see Grandpa," she said. Caleb's clear voice device lay flat on the table. "Hi, Caleb," I said. His fingers moved toward the screen. Vanessa touched his wrist. "He's had a long day. Let him answer." Her smile tightened. "He is answering." He came to the call. I kept my voice level. "Caleb, was the blue door locked on Thursday?" Vanessa leaned toward the phone. "Stephen, no. We are not doing this. Caleb tapped one icon, then another. The device began to speak. Blue door. Vanessa reached down and turned the volume off. The synthetic voice vanished mid-phrase. Turn it back on, I said. He's scripting, she replied. You know he repeats things. I know you interrupted him. Because you're upsetting him. Caleb tapped the dark speaker icon. But nothing sounded. Vanessa lifted the device from the table. This call is over. Put it back in front of him. Ryan's voice came from somewhere behind the camera. Dad! Stop! The screen shifted. For a moment I saw the upstairs railing, several folded banquet chairs stacked against the wall, and a cardboard box printed with the caterer's name. Then the call ended. The room around me returned all at once. The hiss of oxygen, the dry blanket under my palm, the faint lemon smell of disinfectant. Vanessa had not answered the question. She had answered something else. She did not want Caleb finishing the sentence. I opened the trust portal and drafted an emergency property use review. I kept it narrow. Thursday's canceled service verification, the caregiver admin lock event, 6 guest codes, the vendor cleanup entry, the public event tags, the conditional occupancy clause, no accusation that Caleb had been imprisoned, no claim that every event was improper, only facts that required an explanation. Before submitting, I added one more request: preservation of the successor fiduciary shortlist created when the trust was established. Ryan had called me confused. If he tried to remove me as trust director, I needed the record to show that any replacement trustee had already been identified before this fight began. I pressed submit. The portal issued a receipt, then refreshed the property ledger. A household support payment appeared beside Thursday's date. The amount was ordinary enough to disappear among groceries, cleaning, and care expenses. The approval history was not. Approved manually by Ryan Mercer. Time approved, 8:46 in the evening. I opened the florist's photograph again. Ryan stood near the upstairs railing with a drink in his hand. Below the image, the vendor cleanup code had entered the house at 8:32. Below that, my son's approval confirmed household support while the blue door was still locked. Ryan's approval sat beside the payment like a fingerprint he had forgotten to wipe away. I opened the household support list and filtered it by the dates Caleb's phrases had appeared. The portal returned rows of ordinary expenses: groceries, cleaning supplies, transportation, supplemental caregiver hours. Nothing dramatic by itself, which was probably why the pattern had survived. The adhesive pad beneath my collarbone tugged when I shifted against the pillow. A cup of coffee had gone cold on the tray, leaving a burnt smell under the sharper scent of alcohol wipes. My phone vibrated twice against the plastic tabletop. Ryan. I let it ring once more before answering. Dad, he said. What exactly are you doing? Reading what you approved. You're in a hospital bed. So far, that hasn't made the numbers disappear. A breath scraped through his microphone. Those are routine household payments. Routine for whom? For Caleb. For the house. For keeping things moving. The phrase sounded practiced. I scrolled to Thursday's entry and opened the attached certification. Vanessa had claimed supplemental caregiver hours for the same block of time. The blue door remained locked, and guests moved through the upstairs rooms. Did you read the caregiver certification before you approved it? I asked. Ryan paused. Vanessa handles the details. That wasn't the question. I signed what she prepared. You used your phone, confirmed the login, opened the claim, and approved it at 8:46. That's called being a trustee. No. It's called approving a claim. His chair creaked. I pictured him leaning back, though I couldn't see him, and refused to fill in the rest. Ryan lowered his voice. You want me to say I read every line while trying to work, manage this house, and keep everyone from falling apart? Fine. I didn't study every line. Did you know there was an event upstairs? It was a support gathering. Did you attend? That has nothing to do with Caleb's care. The answer arrived too quickly. I opened the vendor photograph. Ryan stood near the railing with a drink in his hand, his watch visible above a rolled cuff. The post timestamp came 14 minutes before his approval. Were you upstairs when you signed? I asked. Silence. Then Ryan said, "We were keeping the family functioning, not helping Caleb. Not verifying care, keeping the family functioning." The words settled between us with the soft ticking of my monitor. "Whose family?" I asked. Ryan's voice sharpened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn everything into a moral test from a hospital bed. You turned my surgery into a deadline." The line went still. For the first time since the photograph appeared in the group thread, Ryan had no answer ready. I ended the call and returned to the audit history. The portal showed more than a signature. Each manual approval carried a device fingerprint, a two-factor confirmation, and a session duration. Ryan's personal phone had opened Thursday's claim, remained on the document long enough to expand the certification, then confirmed the payment. Not a bulk approval, not an automatic batch. He had opened it. A second disputed date showed the same sequence. Therapy canceled by caregiver. Guest codes active. Event vendor tagged at the house. Ryan's phone opened the caregiver claim that evening. The third date took longer to untangle because the household attachment was restricted. I could still see the core ledger, the confirmation code, and the device identifier. Same phone. Same manual approval. My son had not wandered through a stack of paperwork with his eyes closed. He had left a repeated trail. The certification screen required 3 separate acknowledgments before payment. Service delivered. Hours accurate. No duplicate billing. Ryan's device had checked all 3. The audit trail even showed the seconds between each confirmation, too slow for one blind tap and too fast for a careful review. That left 2 possibilities, and neither protected him. Either he had read the claim and approved it knowing the evening did not match, or he had treated Caleb's money as a family checking account where accuracy no longer mattered. A soft alert blinked at the top of the portal. Someone else had entered the file while I was reading it. The tablet chimed with a new portal message. For 1 second, I expected another restriction notice. Instead, the subject line read, "Trustee response regarding medical capacity." Ryan had sent it through the formal system. I opened the message. He described my accounting demand as uncharacteristic, escalating, and potentially influenced by post-operative medication. He requested review of whether my trust director access should remain active while my cognitive condition was being assessed. The wording was careful. No accusation that I was incompetent. No claim that a doctor had diagnosed anything. Just enough smoke to make another person look for fire. My chest pulled when I took a deeper breath. I pressed the pillow against the incision and waited for the monitor to slow. Ryan was not merely defending old approvals now. He was building the record he needed to silence the person reading them. I downloaded the native portal message, the delivery receipt, and my account access history. The core audit trail still showed a document archive linked to the incapacity draft. Its contents remained restricted, but one archived message subject was visible. Replacement language before procedure. I opened the metadata panel. Sender, Ryan Mercer. Created 4 days before surgery. Attached to the continuity document, 3 days before surgery. The message preview held one sentence: "Have the replacement language ready before Dad goes in." A food cart rolled past my door. Metal trays rattled against one another, and the smell of boiled vegetables drifted into the room. I stared at the sentence until the letters blurred. Ryan had not waited to see whether surgery left me confused. He had prepared the language while I was still home packing my hospital bag. My phone contained an old voicemail from him, saved for no sensible reason, except that fathers keep pieces of their children long after the children stop needing to be kept. I found it beneath missed calls from 2 years earlier. "Dad," Ryan's recorded voice said, lighter than, "I know this trust stuff makes you nervous, but I've got it. I'll take care of Caleb's future. You don't have to carry everything." The message ended with the rustle of wind and a car door closing. For years, I had treated that promise as evidence. It wasn't. A promise was sound. Approval logs were action. I did not save the voicemail to the evidence folder. It proved nothing about Thursday. It proved only that I had chosen words when records were available. The nurse entered, carrying fresh electrode leads, and touched 2 fingers to the pulse point at my wrist. "Your monitor is doing the talking for you," she said. "Give me 10 quiet minutes." She removed one adhesive pad. The skin beneath it stung, and the clean replacement clung cold against my chest. "Some of this waited too long already," I said. Her hands stopped for a brief moment. Then she finished placing the lead and set my tablet face down. "Which is why you need to stay alive long enough to finish reading it," she said. While I rested, my phone vibrated under the blanket where I had left it. A formal notice had arrived. Stephen Mercer's Trust Director access was under review due to post-operative cognitive concerns. Until that review concluded, additional household attachments could be restricted to preserve beneficiary privacy. The notice carried Ryan's trustee signature. No physician's statement appeared. No cognitive assessment. Only his concern, dressed in administrative language. When the nurse returned the tablet, I did not call him. I downloaded everything my existing access still allowed. Core approval logs, two-factor records, device fingerprints, message metadata, document creation history, delivery receipts. I made a separate list of what would require native verification from outside providers later. Each file remained in its original format. Each timestamp stayed attached. The process took nearly an hour because I stopped every few minutes to breathe, rest my wrists, and wait for the pressure beneath my sternum to ease. By the time the final download finished, the coffee on my tray had formed a dark skin across the surface. One attachment remained visible before the restriction took effect. Thursday's caregiver certification. Vanessa had certified that she provided direct support to Caleb throughout the evening. Ryan had approved it at 8:46 from his personal phone. I placed the florist's archived photograph beside the claim. Same date. Same minute. Ryan stood upstairs beneath the hanging lights, a glass raised near his mouth, while the certification below his name said Vanessa was providing direct care downstairs. The photograph did not show a confused husband signing whatever his wife placed in front of him. It showed the trustee at the event. And his signature underneath it. Ryan's signature was still open on my tablet when the discharge nurse rolled in a wheelchair. "Mr. Mercer, you're leaving with us, not against us," she said. The brakes clicked beneath me. A paper packet landed on my lap with a soft slap, and the scent of printer toner mixed with the stale coffee I had forgotten beside the bed. My chest felt bound together by wire and stubbornness. Every small turn pulled at the incision. "I can walk," I said. "You can walk to the chair." That sounded rehearsed. "It is." She waited until I pressed the heart pillow against my sternum, then helped me stand. The floor felt farther away than it had the day before. 6 slow steps took more breath than crossing a school auditorium ever had. Ryan had approved the claim while standing upstairs with a drink in his hand. That fact stayed with me all the way to the hospital-affiliated recovery apartment. The place was only a short ride from the cardiac unit, but I arrived sweating beneath my shirt. A home health nurse showed me the call button, checked my medication bottles, and made me walk once from the bed to the bathroom. "No stairs," she said. "No driving, no lifting. 10 minutes of activity, then rest." "What counts as activity?" She looked at the open laptop on the table. "That." The room held a narrow bed, a recliner, and a window facing a parking structure. The air conditioner rattled every time it shut off. My tablet charger warmed the wall outlet, giving off the faint smell of hot plastic. I divided the work into 10-minute blocks. Not because I wanted to, because my body stopped negotiating. The first block was simple. I built 4 columns: date, service status, property activity, payment. No conclusions, no labels, just records. Thursday showed canceled therapy, 6 guest codes, a locked interior door, a cleanup vendor, supplemental caregiver hours, and Ryan's manual approval. 3 weeks earlier, therapy was canceled by caregiver. A florist arrived before 5. 4 temporary codes followed. Utilities spiked. Cleanup came near 9. Vanessa claimed direct support hours. The third date took longer because its vendor invoice was missing. A tagged photograph supplied the time, and the utility bill showed water use nearly double the normal weekday average. That alone proved nothing. Combined with the guest codes and a cleanup charge in the core ledger, it earned a place in the table. By the end of the hour, 7 dates matched at least 3 independent sources. I stopped. The home health nurse returned while I leaned over the screen. "You're gray," she said. "I'm normally pale." Not like printer paper. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. The fabric tightened until my fingers tingled. The number on the display made her mouth flatten. Laptop closed. I'm in the middle of something. You're in the middle of recovering from bypass surgery. She lowered the recliner and waited until I put the tablet face down. For 15 minutes, I listened to the air conditioner knock, the elevator bell, and my shallow breathing. The records would not become more true because I hurt myself reading them. That was difficult to accept. When the nurse left, I returned to the table, but slower. The partial accounting packet arrived just before noon. Ryan had technically complied with my 3-month demand. He had sent totals, summary pages, and selected claim forms. The attachments were ordered by vendor, forcing each cancellation, payment, and event into a different section. A casual reader would find groceries in one place, caregiver compensation in another, maintenance elsewhere, and approvals at the end. Separated, they looked ordinary. Together, they began to look planned. The packet covered only 3 months, but the core ledger, my trust director account, could still search, reached back 14 months. I ignored Ryan's categories and rebuilt every available entry by date. Vanessa's supplemental caregiver claims stretched across that full 14-month period. Some matched completed services and normal household activity. I marked those legitimate and moved on. Others lacked enough documentation, so I marked them unsupported. Then came nights when therapy was canceled, guest codes activated, vendors arrived, and Vanessa still claimed direct support hours. Those required a different label. Disputed. The total climbed. 12,000. 19. 27. By the time I reached the 7th matched event, the disputed claims were approaching $38,400. My finger stopped over the trackpad. That amount did not include the house. It did not include every caregiver payment. It did not prove every gathering made money. It proved enough to ask who benefited when Caleb's scheduled care disappeared. A portal notification sounded. Ryan had added a note to the accounting response. Father appears to be interpreting unrelated household records as evidence of misconduct. The wording was clean, almost bloodless. I copied it into the timeline beside the dates his own phone had approved. My next choice had teeth. If I waited for every original invoice, every provider verification, and every device log, Ryan would have time to close more doors. If I sent what I had, Vanessa would know exactly which records mattered. Either path warned them. Only one created a preservation duty. I assembled a preliminary review packet. Each page carried the source, the date, what it showed, and what it did not show. I wrote allegation, where the fact had not been independently verified. I wrote no conclusion, where the record supported only a question. At the end, I requested an emergency review of property use, supplemental caregiver payments, and service cancellations. Then I added a preservation hold, trust ledger, provider verification, smart lock records, guest codes, vendor invoices, utility statements, clear voice link activity, and account metadata. My hand stayed on the submit button. The room had gone quiet, except for the laptop fan and the pulse in my ears. I submitted it. The receipt appeared at 3:17 in the afternoon. At 3:24, Vanessa posted my hospital photograph. Her caption began with gratitude for people who had checked on our family. Then the language shifted. She wrote that a frightened, confused older man was attacking a special needs household while under the influence of post-operative medication. She said privacy had been violated. She said the people caring for Caleb were being punished for protecting him. Comments piled beneath it. Prayers for your family. Keep that child safe. Some relatives become dangerous when they lose control. Vanessa had more than 80,000 followers trained to trust her soft lighting, careful sweaters, and low voice. Now, my open chest was part of her story. I did not answer. I saved the native post, copied the link, and requested removal of the private hospital image. My reply box remained empty. Public anger would not preserve a single record. The home health nurse found me standing at the window 10 minutes later, one hand braced against the wall. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing physical." That wasn't the question. I returned to the recliner before she could insist. The heart pillow pressed against my chest as she checked my pressure again. "Whatever this is," she said, "you cannot win it by stopping your own heart." "I'm not trying to win. What are you trying to do?" The answer should have been simple. Protect Caleb. But his device had sent me 4 phrases for months, maybe longer, and I had treated them like background noise because Ryan said everything was fine. "I'm trying to find out how late I am," I said. The nurse removed the cuff without replying. Night settled against the window. Garage lights cast pale bars across the carpet. I opened the companion tablet for the weekly ClearVoice link export. The app spun once, then stopped. Primary device synchronization disabled. I refreshed the page. Same message. A system notice showed that the household had withdrawn my authorization minutes after Ryan received the preservation hold. I did not enter another password. I did not try to reach the primary device. Instead, I saved the status notice and sent a preservation request through the access channel that had still been valid when the hold went out. A reply arrived from the provider. The records would be retained. Because my authorization had been withdrawn, any new native release would go only to an authorized successor fiduciary or under court order. The line to Caleb was gone. Below the notice sat an account activity entry I had not seen before. Deletion event. The credential listed was Caregiver Administrator. No person's name. No proof of whose hand had touched the device. Only a timestamp. 3:22 in the afternoon. Ryan had received the preservation hold at 3:18. 4 minutes later, someone inside that house had deleted something from Caleb's communication system. Then they cut the sync. The companion's screen stayed blank when I touched the refresh icon. No new phrases, no status change. Only the same gray notice telling me synchronization had been disabled. I set the tablet on the recovery apartment table and pressed the heart pillow against my chest until the pull beneath my breastbone eased. The glass had gone cold under my fingertips. Behind me, the air conditioner clicked off, leaving the room quiet enough to hear the laptop fan and my own uneven breathing. Calling Vanessa would have felt like action. It would also have warned her which question I planned to ask next. So I opened the preservation receipt instead. The provider had frozen the ClearVoice link records that existed when my request arrived. My authorization was gone, but the read-only companion tablet still held its local archive. Weekly exports, vocabulary versions. Selected message history already delivered before the cutoff. Not everything had vanished. I listed what remained legally available. The local archive, the scanned communication plan, trust records, public timestamps, and the provider's preserved files. Then I closed the screen and walked once to the window, because the home health nurse had told me movement mattered more than pride. 16 slow steps there, 16 back. By the time I sat down, the incision felt tight and hot beneath my shirt. The old communication plan lived in a scanned archive I had not opened in years. The first page carried a gray copier shadow along one edge, faded amber marks from old adhesive tabs, and my handwritten notes compressed into the margin. Caleb had been 6 when we built the first version. I searched by category, not by the phrases on the tablet. People, places, changes, events. That was how the vocabulary had been organized before his parents moved to the current house. A blue door icon appeared in the archived layout. My hand stopped on the trackpad. The icon did not mean one specific door. It belonged to a category labeled Access Status, Open, Closed, Locked, Blocked. Beside it sat a person category: Mom, Dad, Grandpa, Teacher, Visitor. Another section covered expected activities: school, therapy, meal, bedtime, outside. The last category was unusual event: guests, loud noise, broken item, someone crying. 4 kinds of information. Who was there? What access changed? What expected activity did not happen? What unusual event took its place? The synthetic voice from years earlier returned with such clarity that I could hear the small speaker crackle. Dad loud, door closed, dinner late, glass broken. Caleb had been sitting at my kitchen table, his feet not reaching the floor. Ryan and Vanessa had argued in the hallway the night before, then dismissed his words as random combinations from a new device. I had turned the tablet toward Ryan. "He isn't giving us a perfect sentence," I had said. "He's giving us 4 facts." Ryan had rubbed both hands over his face. "Dad, he taps things. You know that. Then ask in the same order." I remembered pointing to the categories one by one. Who was there? Caleb. Dad. What changed? Door closed. What was supposed to happen? Dinner. What was different? Glass broken. Ryan had stared at the device after the last phrase. That was why I created the structure. Not for language drills, not for entertainment, for recall, for a child surrounded by adults who kept deciding his words meant less than theirs. My chair creaked as I leaned back. The archive had been sending me weekly exports for years. At first, I checked every change. Later, when the phrases became repetitive, I let the files pile up unread. Ryan said Caleb liked familiar combinations. Vanessa called it scripting. I accepted their explanation because it cost me less than questioning my son. A notification sounded on the laptop. The professional fiduciary from the approved successor list had agreed to serve as a limited independent records reviewer under the trust's audit provision before deciding whether to accept an appointment. No promise, no decision, only a review of records tied to Caleb's safety and disputed payments. A video conference began 20 minutes later. The fiduciary appeared in a plain office. The Clear Voice Records coordinator joined from another window. Neither offered sympathy. The coordinator spoke first. "Mr. Mercer, your authorization was withdrawn. I can confirm preservation, but I cannot release new records directly to you." "I understand," I said. The fiduciary leaned toward her camera. "I'm requesting only records connected to the trust-funded device and the preservation notice. Selected message history, vocabulary version history, account activity, and device identifiers. No therapy notes, no diagnostic records. That request is within the preserved account scope," the coordinator said. "I can release it to the acting reviewer under the trust audit provision." A file transfer notice appeared. The coordinator continued. ClearVoice Link records selected messages when logging is enabled. It can establish selections, timestamps, device identity, and vocabulary version. It cannot explain intent. "Good," I said. "I don't want intent assigned by software." The fiduciary looked at me for a moment, then asked, "What exactly are you trying to establish?" "That the phrases existed before my surgery, and that the structure existed before the dispute. Nothing more? Nothing the records can't support." The transfer finished. The fiduciary opened the account activity report, while the coordinator verified the file hash and device number. The deletion event from the afternoon of my preservation request appeared near the bottom. "Caregiver Administrator Credential," the fiduciary read. "Can that be tied to a person?" The coordinator clicked into the authentication panel. The credential was used from a registered mobile device. 2-factor confirmation was completed. "Whose device?" I asked. The coordinator did not answer me directly. Her eyes moved to the fiduciary's window. The fiduciary read from the report. "Registered account holder, Vanessa Mercer." A dry sound came from my throat before I could stop it. The coordinator added, "The system shows her registered phone and her authentication token. It shows a deletion action. It does not show why she performed it." Reasonable. Precise. Enough. Vanessa's phone had confirmed the action 4 minutes after Ryan received the preservation hold. The fiduciary retained the native files and promised no outcome. "I'll compare them with the authority in the trust instrument," she said. When the screen went dark, I placed the archived communication plan beside the native export summary she had shared with me. The first complete sequence appeared 8 months earlier. "Mom. Blue door locked. No therapy today. Guests upstairs." Another date carried only 3 elements. "Dad, door locked, school canceled." A third had all 4. "Mom's friends, blue door locked, no therapy today, cleanup people." Not every week fit. Some phrases stood alone. Some sequences broke order. I marked those as incomplete and left them out. The pattern survived without them. On the dates with at least 3 categories, outside records repeatedly supplied the missing piece. Guest codes, vendor tags, canceled services, claims approved by Ryan. Caleb had not created a polished accusation. He had created a calendar. My hands flattened against the table. The wood beneath them felt warmer than the glass screen. For months, he had been naming who was present, what door had changed, which expected activity disappeared, and what replaced it. I had taught him to do that after adults said he could not report an event. Then I became one of the adults who stopped listening. The sentence needed to exist in the record before I touched Ryan's authority. I opened a blank document. My name is Stephen Mercer. I received weekly Clear Voice link exports under a written authorization beginning in the year the system was installed. I did not review those exports consistently. I accepted explanations from Ryan and Vanessa without comparing the phrases to service records, property activity, or the communication plan I helped create. That failure delayed recognition of a pattern affecting Caleb. I stopped typing. The cursor blinked beside the last word. No one had hidden the exports from me. They had arrived, and I had been relieved to believe my son was carrying the responsibility well. That did not change the result. I finished the statement, attached the archived plan version, and sent both to the fiduciary for inclusion in the review packet. Late afternoon light reached across the carpet in a narrow strip. My medication alarm sounded, and I swallowed the pills with lukewarm water before reopening the trust instrument. Ryan still held trustee authority. Removing him would split what remained of our relationship. Replacing him with myself would prove every accusation Vanessa had posted about control. The appointments section offered another path. A licensed independent fiduciary, from the approved successor list, could accept the role after an emergency suspension, supported by documented threats to the beneficiary or trust property. My finger rested on the line. The paragraph below it said the trust director could exercise that power without appointing himself or any family member. By sunrise, the evidence packet had become too heavy to hold in one hand, not because of paper. Most of it lived on the tablet. Still, the folder I had built felt heavier than the heart pillow pressed against my chest. Group thread. Clear voice records. Therapy verification. Lock activity. Vendor posts. Caregiver claims. Ryan's approvals. The incapacity draft. Property documents. Separate sources. Separate questions. I sat at the small table in the recovery apartment while the heating unit clicked behind me. The stylus tapped the glass with a faint plastic tick each time I opened another file. Hand sanitizer had dried across my knuckles, leaving a sharp alcohol smell that followed every movement. My wrist began to tremble before I finished the first page. So I stopped. 10 minutes of work, 10 minutes with my eyes closed. The home health nurse had written that schedule in thick black ink and taped it beside the medication list. I followed it because the pressure beneath my breastbone no longer cared what I wanted. During the next block, I divided every item into 2 columns. Verified fact. Allegation requiring review. The group message was verified. Vanessa had written that the family no longer had a problem after seeing my post-operative photograph. Ryan had answered with a laughing face. The clear voice pattern was verified. The provider had authenticated the selected phrases, timestamps, vocabulary version, and Vanessa's registered device on the deletion event. Whether Caleb had been physically confined behind the blue door remained unverified. The canceled therapy sessions were verified. The reason his parents gave was not. The disputed claims were real. Criminal intent was not established. That distinction mattered. If I acted as a furious father, Ryan could dismiss everything as retaliation. If I acted under the trust instrument, each decision had to rest on what the records proved today, not what I feared they might prove tomorrow. At 9, the professional fiduciary joined the video conference. Her voice was low and even. "Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the native source packet. Is it enough?" "For what?" The question landed harder than a yes or no. "For emergency suspension." "It may be," she said, "but I need to know whether you understand the limits." "I'm listening." "If I accept appointment, ordinary care continues. Therapy that is properly scheduled continues. Food, transportation, medical needs, communication support, and necessary household expenses remain funded. Good. Discretionary distributions can be held. Disputed supplemental caregiver payments can be held. Vendor payments tied to private events can be held. I will not punish Caleb to create pressure on his parents. Neither will I. She moved closer to the camera. You also need to sign the self-appointment waiver before I accept. The muscles along my chest tightened when I shifted in the chair. The trust already prevents me from taking Ryan's place automatically. It prevents automatic succession. It does not prevent you from removing me later and installing yourself if the instrument's appointment power remains intact. I wouldn't. I do not accept jobs based on what frightened families say. They would never do. Her words were not warm. That made them useful. What do you need? I asked. Suspension notice. Appointment instrument. Preservation direction. Permanent release of your power to appoint yourself or another family member. My wrist rested against the table. The skin there looked thin under the morning light. Once signed, the waiver would protect Caleb from Ryan. It would also protect Caleb from me. The fiduciary continued. I'll verify the instrument independently. I will not adopt your conclusions because you assembled the packet. If the evidence points somewhere you dislike, you do not get to take the trust back. Understood. The same word I had sent into the family thread after they laughed. This time, it meant something different. Before the documents arrived, I called Ryan. He answered on the first ring. You've been talking to a stranger about our son, he said. Your son's trust. Don't correct me like I'm 12. Then don't talk as if Caleb's property belongs to you. Ryan breathed through his nose. A cupboard closed on his end. Then Vanessa's voice passed in the background, too faint to make out. I kept my tone level. There is one way to stop an emergency suspension. A short silence followed. You finally want to discuss this like family? Step aside voluntarily. Preserve every record. Restore clear voice access for the authorized review. Stop using my hospital photograph. Turn over the household vendor accounts. His laugh came out flat. You call that a discussion? It is the last choice you control. You have no idea what an outside fiduciary will do to us. They'll freeze everything. They'll question every grocery bill. They'll turn Caleb's life into paperwork. Legitimate care continues. That's what your stranger promised? She reviewed the instrument. Ryan's chair scraped hard across the floor. You're choosing strangers over your son. No, I'm choosing someone who cannot profit from saying yes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my son said, That house is the only thing Vanessa and I ever earned. The sentence was quiet, almost weary. I looked at the deed summary beside my hand. You did not earn Caleb's settlement, I said. We gave up our lives. You were compensated for documented care. You think money replaces what we did? No. I think what you did does not replace whose money it was. Ryan's voice sharpened. You're sick, you're drugged, and you're letting a few files erase years of family. The files are the years, Ryan. He went silent again. I gave him one last chance. Step aside. No. Then preserve the records. You don't get to order me around from a recovery apartment. I'm not asking as your father. That's convenient. The words came softer now, which made them worse. If you sign anything against me, Ryan said, you are not my father after this. The call ended before I answered. My hand remained around the phone until the screen went dark. The documents arrived through the secure portal minutes later. 4 signature lines. The first suspended Ryan's trustee authority on an emergency basis pending review. The second appointed the independent fiduciary from the approved successor list. The third ordered preservation of core accounting, provider verification, property records, vendor accounts, clear voice metadata, and all documents connected to my medical incapacity. The fourth released my power to appoint myself or any relative. The stylus felt too light between my fingers. I signed the suspension notice. A receipt appeared. I signed the appointment instrument. Another receipt. The preservation direction took longer, because my wrist weakened halfway through the signature. I stopped, pressed the pillow against my chest, breathed until the burning eased, then finished without changing the date. The waiver remained. Permanent meant no private reversal later, no fatherly exception, no quiet arrangement if Ryan apologized, no decision made at Caleb's expense because I could not bear losing my son. I touched the stylus to the glass. Signed. The portal asked for final confirmation. I pressed accept. A small tone sounded from the tablet. Nothing dramatic. One clean note. The fiduciary called less than 10 minutes later. I have accepted the appointment, she said. Core notices are being issued now. What happens first? Basic care remains active. Disputed reimbursements are held. Ryan's authority to approve trust distributions is suspended. Banks and vendors will receive notices over the next 2 days. A notification flashed across the portal while she spoke. Trustee credentials revoked. Then another. Successor credentials active. My chest hurt. My son had just lost control of the trust because I had moved my hand across a piece of glass. The fiduciary continued. Ryan attempted to access the distribution page after service of notice. The attempt is logged. Do not contact him about it. I won't. You are no longer the decision-maker for trust administration. The sentence should have felt like a loss. It did. By late afternoon, the first preserved attachments became visible under the fiduciary's authority. She sent me a narrow summary, not the entire file. One document had been linked to the incapacity draft Ryan opened before surgery. Proposed occupancy amendment. The draft had never been executed. I reminded myself of that before reading further. It would have changed conditional occupancy into exclusive long-term control for Ryan and Vanessa. It also allowed them to rent part of the property for approved household income, with Ryan retaining management authority. The final page contained an effective date clause. Not a calendar date, a condition. The amendment would take effect when Stephen Mercer was declared medically incapacitated. Below that line, another provision fixed the control period until Caleb reached adulthood, with renewal language that could have carried it beyond. I read the clause once, then again. They had not been waiting to see whether I survived surgery. They had been waiting for someone to say I no longer understood what they were taking. Vanessa used my hospital photograph again before the successor fiduciary finished serving the last vendor notice. The post appeared just after breakfast, while I was standing beside the recovery apartment window with one hand pressed to the heart pillow. My skin in the picture looked gray beneath the surgical tape. The oxygen tubing curved under my nose. Someone had cropped the frame so tightly that the wires, the bruising, and my half-open mouth filled the screen. Her caption said, "A confused older man was trying to take a disabled child's home while medicated after heart surgery." The heating unit clicked behind me. My shirt still carried the clean, medicinal smell of the hospital laundry, and the skin beneath the adhesive near my collarbone burned every time I turned. Notifications began striking the tablet in quick, bright notes. Praying for Caleb. Some men cannot stand losing control. Protect your son from this. Vanessa's followers knew her voice, her careful sweaters, and the kitchen where she spoke about sacrifice. They did not know the deed. They did not know Ryan's trustee authority had been suspended. They did not know I had signed away any path that could place me in his chair. Silence had protected the evidence. Now it protected her story. I archived the original post, saved the link, and requested removal of my private hospital image. Then I opened a blank video project. The strongest records were also the ones I had no right to expose. Caleb's selected phrases would have silenced some people. Therapy verification would have silenced more. The lock activity and communication history could have turned every comment section against Ryan and Vanessa before an independent reviewer finished the work. I closed those files. No face, no voice, no phrases, no therapy dates, no clinical details. What remained belonged to me or existed in public property and trust records, my post-operative photograph, the family group thread where Vanessa wrote that they no longer had a problem, and Ryan answered with a laughing face. The certified deed summary, the successor fiduciary's acceptance, Ryan's suspension notice, my permanent waiver. The preliminary audit conclusion could be stated only in general terms. Services had been billed on dates when outside providers recorded cancellations. That was enough. The underlying records would stay with the fiduciary. I propped the phone against a stack of discharge instructions. The first recording lasted 19 seconds. My breath broke halfway through the second sentence. I deleted it. The next attempt sounded like a principal lecturing a room that had already made up its mind. Gone. On the third try, the light from the window flattened my face and made the bruising around my neck look darker. I left it. Vanity had no place in this. My name is Stephen Mercer, I said. I am 63 years old, and this photograph was taken after my open-heart surgery. The incision tightened when I breathed. I waited, then continued. My daughter-in-law posted that photograph after writing, "From now on, we don't have a problem anymore." My son answered with a laughing emoji. I replied with one word, "Understood." I placed the native group thread on the screen beside the image. Names remained visible because every person shown had participated in that conversation. No private message from Caleb appeared. For several days, Vanessa has told people I am trying to take a disabled child's home. That statement is false. The word false came out quieter than I expected. I displayed the certified deed summary. The deed never named Ryan or Vanessa personally. It names Ryan only as trustee for Caleb's trust. Ryan's authority is suspended. The successor fiduciary has accepted control, and I signed away any power to put myself in that chair. My fingers had begun to shake. The phone captured the soft scrape of my sleeve against the table. This house was purchased and modified with funds held for Caleb. Ryan and Vanessa were allowed to live there, while the property served him. They did not build personal equity by living in a house held for their son. A pressure band formed beneath my sternum. I stopped until it loosened. An independent fiduciary has also confirmed that disputed claims did not match the underlying service records. I will not show Caleb's private communication or medical records to prove that point on social media. Those records belong in the review, not in a performance. The room went still, except for the air conditioner and my breathing. I was late to this. Weekly information reached me, and I trusted explanations that I should have checked. That delay is mine. That sentence cost more than the ownership statement. I finished, without raising my voice. I did not suspend my son so I could replace him. I suspended him, appointed an independent professional, and gave up my power to appoint myself or another relative. If that makes me the villain in Vanessa's story, the documents are available to tell a different one. I ended the recording. The video was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. I watched it once for accidental exposure. Caleb's name appeared only where the trust required it. No address, no therapy provider, no device screen, no medical detail beyond what Vanessa had already published about me. Then I posted it beneath her accusation. For several minutes, nothing happened. A dozen views, 30, 200. Vanessa had tagged my name in her post and directed her own audience toward me. The same followers who had repeated her story now saw the group thread, the deed summary, the successor acceptance, and the waiver. The notification tones began to overlap. 1,000 views, 5,000. Comments arrived faster than I could read them. He gave up control. Why did she say it was their house? That message after surgery is cruel. Others cut the other way. Why did you wait? Why should anyone trust a grandfather who missed this for months? You are still discussing a child online. I left those comments visible. Some of them were fair. The home health nurse came through the door while the phone kept chiming. She looked from the view count to the pillow braced against my chest. "Turn that sound off," she said. I muted the notifications. Did posting it fix whatever happened? No. Then sit down before you create a second emergency. I lowered myself into the recliner. Sweat had gathered beneath the collar of my shirt, and each shallow breath carried the bitter taste of medication. Public credibility felt less like victory than another room where strangers could inspect my failures. My phone rang while the view count continued climbing. Ryan's name appeared first. When I answered, Vanessa was already shouting through the speaker. "You stole our house!" Her voice cracked on the last word. A cabinet door slammed behind her. "It was never yours," I said. "We lived here," Vanessa shouted. "I cared for him here. I built everything people see. You lived in property held for Caleb." Ryan came onto the line. His voice was lower, but every word arrived clipped. You just destroyed his future in front of thousands of strangers. No. The trust still pays for legitimate care. You embarrassed his mother. Vanessa used my surgical photograph to say I was incompetent. She was protecting our family. From the deed? Vanessa made a sharp sound near the phone. You think a piece of paper knows what I gave up? The paper knows who owns the house. This is our home. The fiduciary controls trust property now. Any decision about where Caleb lives requires assessment and court approval. Nobody is throwing him into the street. Ryan spoke over her. Take the video down. No. You have no idea what people are doing to us. I know what your wife asked them to do to me. That is not the same. The call filled with Vanessa's breathing. When she spoke again, the volume had dropped. You wanted the house, she said. I signed away the power to take control of it. You wanted to punish us. I wanted the records preserved. For a moment, only the faint buzz of their speakerphone remained. Then Vanessa screamed again. Not words this time, just one raw sound that broke into a sob at the end. Ryan told her to stop. Something struck a countertop. The call disconnected. I saved the call metadata and wrote a contemporaneous note. No recording. Washington law did not allow me to turn a private call into evidence without consent, and outrage did not change that. A minute later, the family group thread lit up. Vanessa had typed a new message. You can have the house. Another message appeared beneath it before I could answer. You won't see Caleb again. Vanessa's message remained on the screen after the notification sound faded. You won't see Caleb again. For several seconds, my thumb hovered over the reply box. The easiest answer would have been a threat of my own. Something sharp, something a man could regret before the pain medicine wore off. Instead, I exported the native group thread. The recovery apartment smelled faintly of disinfectant and reheated soup. A delivery cart squeaked somewhere in the hallway, and the heart pillow pressed hard against the incision when I leaned forward. My breathing had gone shallow again. The fiduciary answered on the second ring. I received the message, she said. I'm going to the house. No. The word came flat and immediate. That wasn't a request. It should be. You cannot drive. You do not have custody authority, and the trust does not give either of us the right to remove Caleb from his parents. They just threatened to cut me off from him. They threatened your access. That matters. It does not turn trust administration into custody. Her voice stayed even while the phone warmed against my ear. What can we do? I asked. Preserve the text. Preserve the call metadata. Write a contemporaneous note. Send me the AAC preservation summary and the lock event pattern. I can protect trust, property, and continue essential payments. I cannot decide where Caleb lives. The line under my ribs tightened when I stood too quickly. I pressed the pillow against my chest and sat again. So I wait? No. You petition the court as a person concerned about his welfare. You ask for the narrowest protection that addresses the risk. I'm not asking to become his guardian. Good, she said. Then say that clearly. I sent the native text, the call log, my note, and the records she requested. No edited screenshots. No claim that Vanessa intended to flee. Only what she had written and what the existing records showed. The next morning, my hospital photograph was still spreading, but now so was the video I had posted in response. One frame showed enough of the exterior through a reflection that a local viewer could have recognized the property. I removed that frame. Then I added a correction beneath the video. I am not asking to own Caleb's home or control his trust. I have requested a neutral court-appointed guardian with limited authority over residence, continued services, and communication access while the records are reviewed. The correction cost me some of the audience that wanted a cleaner revenge story. Comments appeared within minutes. You are backing down. Why not take the boy yourself? Because he was not property. That answer stayed in my head while I completed the petition. The requested authority was narrow. Residence, health service continuity, communication access. No authority over the trust. No request to terminate parental rights. No request to make me guardian. My hands began to shake halfway through the declaration, so I stopped and walked the length of the apartment. The carpet dragged beneath my socks. At the window, the parking garage lights blurred into pale circles until my breathing settled. When I returned to the table, I added the sentence I least wanted to write. I received weekly communication records and failed to review them consistently. The filing went in before noon. 2 days later, the expedited hearing opened on my laptop. The court clerk's voice came through a speaker that made every consonant sound brittle. Ryan and Vanessa appeared from the kitchen. The blue door was not visible. A certified professional guardian sat in another video window. Caleb had a communication support person beside him, though the camera showed only the edge of the device and one small hand resting near it. The judge spoke first. This is not a final determination of parental fitness. It is a hearing on requested emergency protection. Mr. Mercer, do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor. Ryan leaned toward his camera. The entire petition comes from a trust dispute. My father is using money records to interfere with our parenting. The judge turned to me. Your response? The trust dispute is not enough by itself, I said. I'm relying on canceled services, repeated interference with Caleb's communication access, a lock pattern that matches private events, an authenticated deletion after a preservation request, and a written threat to cut off contact after control of the trust changed. Vanessa raised one hand. The blue door is a safety door, she said. Her voice carried the same careful softness she used online. Caleb sometimes needs a quiet space. Stephen knows that. I know the door can serve a safety purpose, I said. The log does not prove where Caleb was. That is why I did not claim he was confined behind it. Ryan's mouth tightened. The judge asked, then why include it? Because it was locked for hours, while scheduled services were canceled, guest codes were active, and caregiver payments were claimed. It belongs in the pattern, not as a conclusion. The guardian spoke next. I have reviewed the preservation summary. I recommend an immediate independent assessment and a temporary order preventing relocation or interruption of communication supports until a fuller hearing. Vanessa's hand moved out of frame. You're taking him from us, she said. No, the judge replied. The proposed order does not terminate your status as parents. For the first time that morning, Caleb's device made a soft electronic click. Everyone stopped. No phrase followed. The judge approved an emergency guardian for no more than 60 days, limited to residence, health service continuity, and communication access. Ryan and Vanessa retained supervised contact and the right to participate in the full hearing. Caleb would remain in the trust house, while the existing licensed in-home support team continued under the guardian's direction and the assessment proceeded. The order did not feel like winning. It felt like placing a stranger between a child and the people who had always answered for him. By the third week, the fiduciary sent the first audit classification: legitimate, unsupported, knowingly false. Some caregiver payments were ordinary and documented. Others lacked enough proof to classify. A smaller group matched canceled services, event records, and Ryan's manual approvals closely enough to support proposed repayment and a possible surcharge. The disputed amount was approximately $38,400 across 14 months. Proposed. The fiduciary reminded me over video. This is not a judgment. What happens now? We issue a demand for repayment and trustee removal. If they do not agree to a non-judicial settlement, the trust petitions Superior Court. So the audit does not collect anything. No. It creates a position supported by records. That distinction mattered more than the amount. Ryan called that evening. The recovery apartment was dark except for the lamp beside my chair. Rain ticked against the window, and the medication left a chalky taste along my tongue. Dad, he said, you can stop this from getting worse. How? Call it negligence. I did not answer at once. Ryan continued. Say I approved too fast. Say I trusted Vanessa's documentation. That is still bad enough for your stranger to remove me. But it is not the same as saying I knew. What do you want changed? The final classification. The repayment. My job. Everything. You opened the claims. I was keeping the family together. You were at the events. That does not mean I read every line. His voice cracked on the last word, then hardened again. If you call it negligence, I can sign something. I can pay part of it. We can save what is left of this family. The phrase, save the family, had always meant protecting Ryan from the consequence closest to him. What happens to the records if I agree? I asked. They stay. You just stop pretending they prove what was in my head. They prove what you opened, confirmed, and approved. That is not intent. No, I said. The audit and the court will classify intent, not me. A chair scraped on his end. You would rather let strangers define your son. I would rather stop defining the truth for him. Silence. Then Ryan said, You are not getting me back after this. I know. The call ended. I wrote a contemporaneous note and saved the metadata. No secret recording. No victory speech. The assessment took place the next morning under the emergency guardian's authority. I was allowed to observe part of it by video, but not direct the questions. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, with clear voice link angled toward him. The guardian asked whether he wanted the blue door open, closed, or changed. His fingers moved slowly across the screen. My hand closed around the heart pillow. One icon, then another. The device spoke. I want. The cursor blinked while Caleb lifted his hand to choose the rest. The unfinished words followed me into the full guardianship hearing. I want. Caleb had selected them during the emergency assessment, then pulled his hand away when the guardian asked whether he needed a break. Nobody completed the sentence for him. Nobody should have. 8 weeks after my surgery, the words still sat in my head while rain tapped the windows of the recovery apartment. The laptop speaker gave a thin electronic hiss. My palm rested over the heart pillow, and a deep breath still pulled along the center of my chest. Ryan and Vanessa appeared together on the hearing screen. Her hands were folded tightly on the kitchen table. My son kept looking toward the corner where Caleb sat with his clear voice device and a communication support person. The judge spoke first. This is not a hearing to terminate parental rights. It is a review of whether limited guardianship remains necessary. Does everyone understand? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Ryan answered at the same time. Vanessa nodded without speaking. Their attorney argued that removing Ryan as trustee had already ended the financial conflict. Vanessa said the blue door had always been used for safety, not punishment. The guardian described the canceled services, interrupted communication access, authenticated deletion, and the need for someone who could approve Caleb's residence and health services without controlling his money. When the judge addressed me, her tone stayed measured. Mr. Mercer, are you asking to serve as guardian? No, Your Honor. Are you asking for authority over the house? No. Then what do you want from this order? My fingers tightened around the pillow. That Caleb's communication not be turned off when his answer is inconvenient. Vanessa looked down. The judge granted a limited minor guardianship, subject to review after 6 months. The guardian received authority over residence, health service coordination, and communication access. Ryan and Vanessa remained Caleb's parents. They retained supervised contact and a role in educational decisions under the order. No gavel struck. The clerk read deadlines, and the hearing ended. Before Ryan's screen went dark, he leaned toward the camera. You got what you wanted, he said. No, I replied. I gave up getting what I wanted. 3 months after surgery, the fiduciary sent an audit report instead of a victory announcement. The claims had been divided into 3 groups. Legitimate care stayed untouched. Unsupported claims remained disputed. The knowingly false group matched canceled services, private events, Vanessa's caregiver certifications, and Ryan's manual approvals. The proposed repayment remained $38,400. Ryan rejected the first settlement offer. Vanessa rejected the second. Both argued that the trust had benefited from their years in the house, so private use should be treated as an offset against unpaid sacrifice. The fiduciary answered with records. Documented care had already been compensated. Living in property held for Caleb did not create equity. Hosting private events did not become caregiving, because he was somewhere under the same roof. A petition to Superior Court was prepared. 2 days before filing, Ryan called while I sat at cardiac rehabilitation. Rubber flooring gave off a warm, chemical smell. A treadmill beeped behind me, and the therapist had just lowered the resistance on a seated machine. "Dad," Ryan said, "we'll sign." "Both of you?" "Yes." "What changed?" "The petition names everything. The settlement does too. That stays private." Vanessa spoke behind him, too low for me to make out. Ryan continued. "We repay the disputed amount over time. I am removed as trustee. We waive any claim to equity. Vanessa's supplemental caregiver compensation ends. And the occupancy transition?" Silence held for several seconds. "We leave when the guardian and fiduciary finish the plan." The therapist pointed toward the clock. My rest period was nearly over. "Then sign it," I said. Ryan's voice dropped. "You could have stopped this." "I did." "No. You could have stopped it before it reached us." The call ended. The signed agreement arrived that afternoon. It did not seize their bank accounts or sell their belongings. Repayment would come through a secured payment plan from personal funds, not Caleb's trust. Ryan lost trustee authority permanently. Vanessa lost the trust-funded caregiver compensation tied to the false claims. They did not lose every dollar, every relationship, or every legal right. They lost what the records could support. By the 5th month, the house no longer looked like the background of Vanessa's videos. The hanging lights were gone. So were the banquet chairs and locked cabinets filled with event supplies. The guardian coordinated the residence plan, while the fiduciary handled inventory, notices, and transfer of household accounts. Ryan and Vanessa moved into a rented townhouse several miles away. They took their clothes, personal furniture, family photographs, and kitchenware they had purchased. They did not take the adaptive equipment, the clear voice devices, or anything bought with Caleb's settlement. There was no sheriff at the door, no crowd, only boxes, signatures, and packing tape pulled across cardboard. I did not go to the house that day. The guardian sent me the transition report afterward. Caleb stayed with the licensed in-home support team he already knew. Therapy resumed. Ryan and Vanessa continued supervised visits. The blue door remained in place until Caleb could decide what he wanted changed. That same week, Ryan called one last time. I was walking slowly on a treadmill, watched by a therapist who cared more about my pulse than my family history. "You chose a system over your son," Ryan said. The belt moved beneath my shoes with a low rubber whisper. "I chose a system you could not sign around. You always think paperwork makes you right. No. Paperwork tells me what I did when memory starts bargaining." His breathing shifted. "I was trying to keep us together," Ryan said. "You kept asking Caleb's trust to hold your life together. So that is all I am to you now." My hand tightened on the rail. The therapist glanced over, and I loosened it. "You are my son," I said. "That is why I made excuses longer than I should have." Ryan did not answer. The treadmill counted another slow minute. "I'm not calling again," he said. "I know." When the line went dead, the therapist asked whether I needed to stop. "No," I said. "Lower the speed." 6 months after surgery, I entered Caleb's house for the first time since the trust changed hands. Wood cleaner and grilled cheese scented the hallway. A cabinet closed in the kitchen. Clear voice gave a soft startup tone from the table. The blue door stood at the far end of the hall. Closed, not locked. The guardian sat beside Caleb. A care representative remained near the counter. Nobody arranged us for a photograph or told him what the meeting was supposed to mean. I lowered myself into the chair across from him. The scar beneath my shirt pulled, but the pain had become a line I could live around instead of a wall. The guardian spoke directly to Caleb. "This is your home. What do you want changed?" His fingers moved across the screen. I kept mine folded in my lap. Caleb selected blue door. Then, open. Then, a phrase he had added during therapy. "Ask me first." The device spoke in its calm, synthetic voice. The guardian nodded. "Do you want the electronic lock removed?" Caleb selected yes. "Do you want the whole door removed?" "No." "Do you want it open all the time?" He paused, then chose "ask me first" again. The care representative wrote down the answer. No one turned toward me for translation. A maintenance worker removed the electronic lock while we waited at the kitchen table. The drill gave 2 short bursts. Metal screws clicked into a plastic tray. When the lock came free, a pale rectangle remained on the blue paint where sunlight had never reached. Caleb watched every movement. Ryan was not there. Vanessa was not there. The settlement had not repaired them, and the court order had not turned loss into peace. But the door no longer answered to a caregiver account. When the worker finished, the guardian asked Caleb whether he wanted to try it. He stood, walked down the hall, and placed his hand against the blue panel. The hinges gave a low wooden sigh. Caleb opened the door himself. Then he returned to the table, touched the screen, and selected the phrase that had first reached me from a hospital bed. "Blue door open." I said nothing. For once, nobody did. When Caleb said, "Blue door open," the meaning was larger than a lock. You had just watched a child reclaim the right to decide what happened in his own home, after adults had used his silence, his trust, and even his care as tools for their convenience. That is the clearest lesson this story leaves behind. Love is not proven by how loudly someone claims sacrifice. It is proven by whether the person with less power is safer, heard, and allowed to choose. You also learn that family loyalty has limits. Being a father does not require you to protect your son from the consequences of choices he knowingly made. Being a grandfather does require you to protect a child whose money, home, services, and communication were being controlled by the very people trusted to care for him. Stephen paid for that choice. He lost his son's trust, gave up the chance to appoint himself, accepted outside oversight, and allowed a stranger to hold authority he could have tried to keep. That cost matters. Without it, his decision would have been revenge. Because he accepted the loss of control, it became protection. There is another practical lesson here. When facts are scattered, harmful behavior can look ordinary. One canceled therapy session may have an explanation. One caregiver payment may be legitimate. One locked door may be for safety. One photograph may prove nothing. But when dates, approvals, service records, account logs, and public posts begin to match, you should stop accepting the easiest explanation, simply because it comes from someone you love. You do not need to accuse first. You need to preserve records, ask narrow questions, separate what is proven from what is suspected, and let independent review test the pattern. Stephen also had to admit something painful. The information had reached him before, and he had not listened closely enough. That does not make him responsible for Ryan and Vanessa's actions. It does show that good intentions are not the same as attention. When a child, an older parent, or a disabled family member communicates differently, you cannot dismiss repetition as meaningless just because understanding it takes time. Sometimes the person everyone calls confused is the only one reporting the situation accurately. The story does not ask you to forgive people who used care, money, and family ties to control someone weaker. It does not suggest that consequences should disappear because the wrongdoer is your child, spouse, or parent. Forgiveness and access are different things. Love and trust are different things. You may still love someone and refuse to return their authority. So ask yourself this: if protecting a vulnerable family member meant losing the approval of someone you loved, would you still act? Would you be willing to give up control yourself, as Stephen did, so your decision could not be dismissed as a grab for power? And have you ever ignored a small warning because accepting it would have forced you to see someone in your family differently? If you have faced a moment when loyalty and protection pulled you in opposite directions, share what helped you decide. Your experience may be the reason another person finally opens the door they have been afraid to question.